T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery.
Discovery's roll maneuver is complete. It's now in a heads-down position on track for its flight to the International Space Station.
Farther from Earth than any person has traveled in over half a century. Let that sink in. Since 1972, before smartphones, before the internet, before most of the people alive on this planet were even born, not a single human soul had ventured beyond low Earth orbit. For 53 years, the moon hung in our night sky, cold and silent, watching us from a distance, as if waiting for us to find the courage, the technology, and the will to come back. That wait is over. On April 1st, 2026, at 6:35 in the evening Eastern Time, the ground shook at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. A 322-foot rocket, taller than the Statue of Liberty with her pedestal, roared to life and tore through the atmosphere with nearly 9 million pounds of thrust. And sitting inside a capsule at the very top of that rocket were 4 human beings: Commander Reed Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, Mission Specialist Christina Koch, and Mission Specialist Jeremy Hansen. Together, they became the first people to leave Earth's orbit since the crew of Apollo 17 stepped off the moon in December 1972. This is not just a space mission. This is a civilizational moment. Today, I'm going to take you through everything. The history that built up to this day, the rocket, the spacecraft, the crew, the 10-day mission timeline moment by moment, the historic records being broken right now in real time, the science aboard this flight, and what this all means for the future of humanity on the moon, on Mars, and beyond. Buckle up, because this story is one for the ages. To understand why Artemis II is so extraordinary, you have to understand why it took so long. When Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon in July 1969, it felt like the beginning of something eternal. Surely, people thought, within a decade, humans would have a base on the moon. Within a generation, we'd be heading to Mars. The future was arriving fast, and it felt unstoppable. Then, it stopped. The Apollo program was born in the fires of the Cold War. It was a race, the United States versus the Soviet Union, for the soul of the space age. Once America won that race by planting a flag on the lunar surface, the political will and the funding that had sustained Apollo began to evaporate. The missions became increasingly expensive, increasingly dangerous in the public perception following the Apollo 13 near disaster, and increasingly difficult to justify to a nation wrestling with Vietnam, civil rights, and economic turmoil. Apollo 17 launched in December 1972. Astronauts Gene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt walked on the moon while Ron Evans orbited above. When Cernan climbed back up the ladder of the lunar module for the last time, leaving his daughter's initials traced in the lunar dust, he spoke words that would carry a painful irony for decades. "We leave as we came, and God willing, we shall return, with peace and hope for all mankind." God willing. Mankind did not will it, not for 53 years. There were attempts. The space shuttle flew 135 missions in 30 years, but was designed for low Earth orbit, never the moon. In the 1980s, there were proposals for lunar bases. In the 1990s, there were more proposals. In 2004, President George W. Bush announced the Constellation program, a return to the moon by 2020. Constellation was canceled by President Obama in 2010. In 2017, the Artemis program, named for the twin sister of Apollo in Greek mythology, was born under NASA's new direction. It was ambitious, return to the moon by 2024 with the first woman and the first person of color to walk on the lunar surface. 2024 came and went. The timelines slipped, as they always do in human spaceflight. The moon, it turned out, does not yield to political deadlines. But Artemis held on. Engineers worked through years of setbacks, an unexpected heat shield erosion problem discovered after the Artemis 1 uncrewed test flight in November 2022, life support system issues, hydrogen leaks that plagued the massive Space Launch System rocket, delays upon delays upon delays. And then, finally, April 1st, 2026, no joke, the most significant human spaceflight launch since the Space Shuttle Columbia's first flight in 1981. 4 humans headed to the moon. Before we meet the crew, let's talk about the extraordinary machines that are carrying them. The Space Launch System, or SLS, is the most powerful rocket NASA has ever built. At 322 feet tall and generating 8.8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff, it is more powerful than the Saturn VII rockets that carried Apollo astronauts to the moon. Think about that. The most powerful rocket in human history, the Saturn VII, which launched every single moon mission during Apollo, has now been surpassed. The SLS Block 1 configuration, which is the version flying on Artemis 2, uses 4 RS-25 engines at its core. These aren't new engines. Remarkably, they are the same engines that powered the Space Shuttle for 30 years, refurbished and upgraded for the Moon program. The rocket also uses 2 solid rocket boosters, each burning a staggering 5.5 tons of solid propellant every second during launch. Those boosters, derived from Space Shuttle booster technology, provide the majority of thrust for the first 2 minutes of flight. 8 minutes after liftoff, the core stage, having burned its fuel completely, separates from the spacecraft, and Orion and the crew are in space. 8 minutes. From the ground to orbit in the time it takes most people to make a cup of coffee. Now, the Orion spacecraft itself, this is NASA's most advanced crewed vehicle ever built. It's named after one of the most recognizable constellations in the night sky, and its job is nothing less than keeping 4 human beings alive in the harshest environment known to exist, deep space. Orion is made up of 2 main sections. The crew module, the pressurized capsule where the crew lives and works, is built by Lockheed Martin and is based loosely on Apollo capsule geometry, but far more sophisticated. It measures about 16.5 feet in diameter, making it the largest capsule NASA has ever flown. It has enough room for 4 astronauts to move around, sleep, eat, exercise, and conduct science operations. The second section is the European Service Module, or ESM, built by Airbus for the European Space Agency. This is Orion's engine room, its power source, its propulsion, its life support supplies. The ESM provides up to 6,000 pounds of thrust through its main engine, the Orbital Maneuvering System engine. It also unfurls 4 solar array wings that span 63 feet tip to tip, drinking in sunlight to power the spacecraft throughout the mission. The European contribution here is not just symbolic, it is structural and essential, and it represents the most significant international collaboration on a human deep space mission since the Apollo-Soyuz test project in 1975. Orion is also protected by the most advanced heat shield ever built. After the Artemis 1 uncrewed test flight in November 2022, engineers discovered unexpected erosion in the heat shield's ablative material, the substance designed to burn away in a controlled fashion as the capsule re-enters Earth's atmosphere at nearly 25,000 miles per hour, enduring temperatures approaching 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, half the temperature of the surface of the Sun. That's not a typo. Half the temperature of the surface of the Sun. To address the heat shield concern, engineers made a critical change for Artemis 2. The capsule will hit the atmosphere at a steeper angle than Artemis 1, reducing the total time it spends in that extreme thermal environment, while still ensuring a safe, controlled descent. These are not simple machines. The SLS and Orion represent decades of engineering, billions of dollars of investment, and the accumulated knowledge of every human spaceflight program that came before. Reed Wiseman is from Cox Hills, Maryland. He earned a bachelor's degree in engineering from Rensselaer Institute of Technology and a master's degree from Johns Hopkins University. He became a naval aviator in 1999 and deployed twice to the Middle East as a fighter pilot. In 2014, he flew to the International Space Station aboard a Russian Soyuz capsule and spent 165 days in orbit, conducting 2 spacewalks and completing a record-breaking 82 hours of scientific research in a single week. He later served as NASA's chief astronaut. He has described the mission with a quiet intensity. He is, as of this mission, the oldest person ever to travel beyond low Earth orbit. He is also a man who has faced profound personal struggle, raising his daughters largely as a single father after deep family hardship, and who has talked about the emotional weight of leaving them behind to take on this mission. He said, "They would rather I not go, but they also know this is a unique opportunity. The parents have to live their dreams, just like the kids have to live their dreams." He commanded this crew from the left seat of Orion. Victor Glover, pilot. Victor Glover Jr. is from Pomona, California. He is a U.S. Navy captain, a decorated test pilot, and engineer with 3 master's degrees in military aviation, systems engineering, and management. He has logged more than 3,500 hours in over 40 aircraft and completed 24 combat missions. In 2020 and 2021, he flew aboard the first operational SpaceX Crew Dragon flight to the ISS, spending 168 days in orbit and becoming the first black astronaut to live on the ISS for a long-duration mission. He completed 4 spacewalks. Now, with Artemis 2, Victor Glover has made history again. He is the first person of color ever to travel beyond low Earth orbit. In the entire history of human spaceflight, from Yuri Gagarin in 1961 through every Apollo mission, every Skylab mission, every Space Shuttle flight, every Mir mission, every ISS mission, no person of color had ever left Earth's orbit. That changed on April 1, 2026 at 6:35 p.m. Eastern Time. When the mission was announced back in 2023, Glover spoke with raw emotion about telling his children he'd been assigned to Artemis. "I was going through a lot when I got assigned to this mission, and when I told them, they erupted. Let's go! I didn't even know I needed that moment." Christina Koch, mission specialist. Christina Koch was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and grew up in Jacksonville, North Carolina. An electrical engineer and explorer by nature, she has conducted research in some of the most remote places on Earth, including stints at remote scientific outposts in Antarctica. She became a NASA astronaut in 2013, and in 2019 and 2020, she spent 328 consecutive days aboard the International Space Station, setting the record for the longest single spaceflight by a woman in history. She conducted 6 spacewalks, including participation in the first all-female spacewalk in history, alongside astronaut Jessica Meir. Jeremy Hansen, mission specialist. Jeremy Hansen was born in London, Ontario, and grew up on a farm before his family moved to Ingersoll, Ontario. At age 12, he joined the Royal Canadian Air Cadet Squadron and earned his glider pilot wings at age 16, his private pilot's license at 17. He went on to earn a bachelor's degree in space science from the Royal Military College and trained as a CF-18 fighter pilot, serving as a combat operations officer working with NORAD on Arctic flying operations. He was selected by the Canadian Space Agency as an astronaut in 2009, and in 2017 became the first Canadian to lead a NASA astronaut class. Artemis 2 is Jeremy Hansen's first spaceflight, and on his very first mission, he tried Canadarm3, the powerful robotic arm that will be a key part of planned future lunar infrastructure. But make no mistake, Hansen earned his place through years of hard work, training, and professional excellence. The days leading up to the launch were tense. The Artemis II SLS rocket had faced delays before. February and March launch opportunities missed due to last-minute repairs. The rocket stacking had begun in November 2024, and the fully integrated stack had been rolled out to Launch Pad 39B, the same historic pad used for Apollo 10, Apollo 16, Apollo 17, and numerous space shuttle missions, in January 2026. A second rollout occurred on March 20, 2026, after the first was brought back for inspections. The crew entered quarantine on March 18th in Houston to ensure they stayed healthy, the standard practice before any crewed mission. They arrived in Florida on March 27th. The morning of April 1st, engineers began the long, careful process of loading more than 700 gallons of cryogenic propellant into the rocket. Launch day was not without drama. Engineers identified a battery temperature issue in the launch abort system, the emergency escape tower that sits atop Orion and could rocket the crew to safety in the event of a catastrophic rocket failure. After analysis, the team determined it was an instrumentation issue, a sensor glitch, not an actual battery problem, and cleared the mission for launch. At 6:35 p.m. Eastern Time, the RS-25 engines ignited with a thunderous roar. 7 seconds later, the solid rocket boosters lit, and the SLS rocket, all 322 feet, all 5.75 million pounds of it, lifted off the pad. Commander Wiseman reported seeing a moonrise almost immediately after launch. He said simply, "We have a beautiful moonrise. We're heading right at it." At approximately 2 minutes into flight, the solid rocket boosters, each the size of a small building, separated from the core stage at an altitude of about 30 miles and a speed of roughly 3,100 miles per hour. The core stage burned on, the 4RS insertion. Day 2, the translunar injection, the point of no return. Control mission woke the crew on Day 2 with Green Light by John Legend featuring Andre 3000, an appropriately energetic song for the most consequential day of the mission so far. Wiseman and Glover set up and tested Orion's flywheel exercise device, while Koch prepared for the main event, the translunar injection, or TLI. Days 3 and 4, translunar transit. With the TLI complete, Orion settled into what might seem like a quieter phase of the mission, but there is nothing quiet about flying to the moon. The crew had a full schedule. They monitored Orion's systems continuously, performing checks on propulsion, life support, avionics, and communications. They exercised daily on the flywheel device, not just for health, but as a deliberate test of the life support systems, since physical exertion changes the atmosphere inside the capsule. They participated in space-to-ground video calls, sharing their extraordinary perspective with the world. Day 5. Spacesuit testing near the moon. As Artemis II approached the moon's gravitational neighborhood, the crew had a full day dominated by spacesuit testing. The orange suits worn by the Artemis II crew are called the Orion Crew Survival System. They are not the bulky EVA suits used for spacewalks. These are pressure suits designed for launch, re-entry, and emergencies. Critically, if Orion were to depressurize during flight, these suits could provide a breathable atmosphere to each crew member for up to 6 days. Day 6, the lunar flyby, the moon up close. Day 6, the day that 4.6 billion years of planetary formation, 400,000 years of human evolution, and 65 years of spaceflight all built toward, the lunar flyby. Artemis II does not orbit the moon. It does not land on the moon. Instead, it flies what's called a free return trajectory. a path that uses the moon's gravity as a slingshot, swinging the spacecraft around the far side of the lunar surface and hurling it back toward Earth. This trajectory is elegant in its efficiency. It requires less fuel and provides a built-in emergency return capability. If anything goes wrong, gravity itself will bring the crew home. Day 7. Rest. Day 7 was the crew's off-duty day. After 6 days of launch, burns, systems checks, spacesuit tests, and lunar flyby, the mission schedulers built in a day of rest. The astronauts were free as 4 humans in a capsule 250,000 miles from Earth can be, to simply exist, to look out the windows, to reflect. For the first time since Apollo, human beings had time to simply be near the moon, not working, not checking instruments, just being. Days 8 and 9, the journey home. With the lunar flyby complete, Orion 2 began the long fall back to Earth. The free return trajectory was doing its work. The moon's gravity had bent Orion's path, and the spacecraft was accelerating back toward the blue-white marble it left 9 days ago. The crew continued systems testing and monitoring throughout the return journey. Science investigations continued. Space-to-ground communications kept the crew connected to their families and to the world watching below. Day 10. Re-entry and splashdown. April 10th, 2026, the last day of the mission. Orion separates from the European service module, jettisoning it to burn up in the atmosphere, and orients itself for the most terrifying 8 minutes in human spaceflight. Re-entry. Orion hits the upper atmosphere at approximately 25,000 miles per hour. At that velocity, the air in front of the capsule cannot get out of the way fast enough. It compresses and heats to approximately 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat shield on the bottom of the capsule faces this inferno, ablating, burning away in a controlled fashion to carry the heat away from the crew. Unlike a return from the International Space Station, there is no second chance here. If something goes wrong during re-entry, there is no abort. Rick Henfling, the lead Artemis II entry flight director, described it with calm precision. Once Orion hits entry interface and the heat starts building on the shield, there is no turning back. Let's talk about the records, because they deserve a moment of awe. Artemis II is expected to set the record for the farthest any human has ever traveled from Earth, reaching approximately 252,799 miles at maximum distance. The previous record was held by the crew of Apollo 13 in 1970, who reached approximately 248,655 miles as their crippled spacecraft swung around the moon in a desperate race to come home alive. Artemis II also traveled approximately 4,700 miles beyond the far side of the moon, farther into deep space than any human in history. This is a test mission. That's important to understand. The primary goal of Artemis II is not science, it is verification. NASA needs to know that every system on Orion works the way the engineers designed it to work in the actual deep space environment with an actual crew aboard. The uncrewed Artemis I mission in 2022 gave NASA a baseline, but human bodies and human activity change everything aboard a spacecraft. Humans breathe out carbon dioxide, they generate heat, they sweat, they move around, changing the center of gravity. They consume water and food and produce waste. They get sick and nervous and excited and tired. The interaction between a human crew and a spacecraft's systems is extraordinarily complex. Artemis II is not a destination, it is a stepping stone, and the path it's stepping onto leads somewhere extraordinary. Artemis III, 2027. The next mission in the series is currently planned for 2027. Artemis III will be the first lunar landing since Apollo 17 in 1972. Unlike Apollo, which used a dedicated lunar module built specifically for the mission, Artemis III will use commercial lunar landers. The current plan involves the Orion spacecraft launching on SLS, with 2 astronauts descending to the surface in a commercial lander while 2 remain in orbit. The landing target is near the lunar South Pole, a region Apollo never visited, where permanently shadowed craters are believed to contain water ice. That water could be electrolyzed into hydrogen and oxygen, rocket fuel, and breathable air, enabling a future permanent human presence on the Moon. The first person to walk on the Moon since 1972 will almost certainly be a woman, one of NASA's core commitments for the Artemis program. There's a question worth asking directly. In an age of robotic probes, AI systems, and unmanned spacecraft that can go further, stay longer, and risk nothing, why send humans? The answer is not simple, but it is important. Robotic exploration is extraordinary. The Mars rovers, Curiosity, Perseverance, have told us incredible things about the red planet. The James Webb Telescope has shown us the birth of galaxies 13 billion years away. Machine intelligence is transforming science at a pace no human team could match. When astronauts travel to the Moon, they go for all of us. And when they look back at Earth, a blue marble hanging in the black void, fragile and illuminous and alone, they see it with new eyes. Every astronaut who has seen Earth from space has described a fundamental shift in perspective. The borders dissolve, the conflicts shrink, the beauty overwhelms. Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14 astronaut, called it an instant global consciousness. He felt the universe as something unified and himself as part of something far larger. This is not the end of the beginning. It's not even the beginning of the end. It is, truly, just the beginning. Artemis 2 is the opening act, the proof that we can do this, that after 53 years of waiting, of planning, of building, of failing and trying again and failing differently and trying again, we can once more point our best and bravest toward the Moon and say, "Go." And they went. In the decades to come, when children grow up in a world where the Moon is a place that humans regularly visit, where there may be a research base in the permanently shadowed craters of the lunar South Pole, where the first crew is training for Mars, they will look back at April 1st, 2026, the way we look back at July 20th, 1969, as the day it became real again, as the day humanity remembered what it was for. When Gene Cernan climbed that ladder in December 1972, he believed they would return. It took 53 years. It required the work of hundreds of thousands of people. It required political will and engineering genius and international partnership and the courage of 4 extraordinary human beings willing to ride a rocket to the Moon. But they returned. The Moon is waiting, and humanity, finally, thrillingly, tears in your eyes and goosebumps on your arms, has answered the call.